Hello, team players! The new Rival Academies book is out now, and that means it's time to talk about the Remastered Runelord Archetype. The first thing you need to know is that this is a rare class archetype. That means you must get your GM's permission in order to use this archetype. In addition, this is a class archetype for Wizard, so you must be a Wizard, and you need to take the Runelord dedication as your second level class feat. You must also associate it with one of the 7 deadly sins: envy, gluttony, greed, lust, pride, sloth, or wrath. The Runelord archetype gives you training in polearms and spears, and when your proficiency with simple weapons increases, so does your proficiency in these weapons. You also learn Thessalonian as a language. Also, instead of an arcane thesis, you gain a personal rune that you can put on these weapons. You must also select the School of Thessalonian Rune Magic as your arcane school. When you cast a school spell or a curriculum spell, you do not need to speak incantations. You simply trace the runes in the air. Also, when you refocus, you do so by contemplating or indulging in your sin. At 8th level, you automatically gain the advanced school spell feats, thus automatically gaining the focus spell for the School of Thessalonian Rune Magic, which I'll talk about later in this video. As a Runelord, you must choose a polearm or spear as your arcane bond. This functions as a staff that has the same number of charges as the highest rank spell you can cast. This staff includes all the sin spells you can cast, including cantrips. This personal rune is not considered a property rune and therefore doesn't count toward the weapon's limit of runes. When you prepare another magical staff, you can merge it with this staff. Doing so merges that staff's charges and spell list with your personal staff. However, all these benefits do come with a downside. Each sin is opposed by 2 others. This is represented by the sin's anathema. If you violate your sin's anathema, you lose the benefits of your personal rune, and whenever you cast a spell of your curriculum or sin spell, you must succeed at a DC 15 flat check or the spell is lost. This disruption lasts until you complete an Atone ritual. However, unlike a normal Atone ritual, you can use Arcana for the primary and secondary checks. Your curriculum spells, including the spells of your own sin, never violate this anathema, even if it seems like these spells should. Now, I'm not going to go over all these spells that you can cast from the School of Thessalonian Rune Magic, but I will put them up on screen. As for the sins, it's not completely clear which sins are opposed to what other sins, but I'm going to do my best to tell you the opposing sins based on the anathema of these sins. And I will put the sin spells on screen and go over the focus spells. So let's start with the school spell that all Runelords get. Personal Rune Well. Personal Rune Well creates a 15-foot radius, 30-foot high cylinder within 30 feet that lasts for 1 minute. This Rune Well creates one of 2 effects. If you or one of your allies cast a spell in this Rune Well, then it gets a status bonus equal to the spell's rank on damage. However, should an enemy try to cast a spell within this Rune Well, the Rune Well can fire arcane bolts at the enemy, dealing 4d6 force damage. This requires a basic reflex save. If you cast this spell a second time, the previous one ends. You can also dismiss this spell at any time. This spell also heightens extremely well, dealing an additional 1d6 damage for every rank past 4. Alright, for envy, it seems like the opposing schools are Gluttony and Wrath. And of course, I do have the sin spells right here. And the initial school spell for envy is Cutting Eye. As a reaction, if you are the target of an attack or must make a saving throw against a spell that you're aware of, you are not considered off guard against that attacker or spellcaster until the beginning of your next turn. You also gain a +2 circumstance bonus to your AC against the attack or a +2 bonus to your saving throw against that spell. In other words, you gain a bonus to your defense against that spell or attack no matter what. And if you were off guard, you're not anymore. Gluttony's opposing schools are Lust and Envy, and you gain the all-encompassing hunger focus spell. For one action, you can target one living creature within 30 feet and force it to make a basic fortitude saving throw. This spell deals 1d6 void damage per spell rank. In addition, if the target is reduced to 0 hit points by this spell, it dies, and you gain temporary hit points equal to the damage dealt. These temporary hit points last for 1 minute. Personally, I'm not a huge fan of this one because it does damage, sure, and if you're gonna knock them down to 0 hit points, they're gonna die anyway. The temporary hit points are nice, but otherwise, this is just damage. It's not that great. Moving on, we have the Greed Sin, which is opposed by Lust and Pride. You also gain the Precious Gleam focus spell. For one action, you can target one weapon within 60 feet. Until the beginning of the next turn, the next attack that is made with that weapon deals an extra 1d6 damage per spell rank. You can also choose to make the weapon cold iron, silver, or steel, bypassing resistances accordingly. This is fantastic since you can use it on any weapon that has metal in it. Swords, arrows, whatever. And it doesn't even have to be your weapon. You can use it on somebody else's. Next we have the Lust Sin, which is opposed by Greed and Gluttony. You also gain the Heart's Hook focus spell. For two actions, you can target two creatures within 120 feet, both of which must make a will saving throw. However, you can choose for one of the creatures to automatically succeed on their will save. If the creature fails on its saving throw, it must spend one of its actions moving toward the other target of this spell. It can't delay or take any reactions until it has done this. On a critical failure, the target must spend all of its actions doing this. Another fantastic focus spell here, as you can basically target, say, an enemy spellcaster in the back and your fighter or barbarian. You can have the fighter or barbarian automatically succeed on their saving throw, so nothing happens to them. But the spellcaster now has to move towards the barbarian or fighter, assuming they fail or critically fail. This is really a fantastic way to help any melee attacker, but especially fighters and barbarians. Definitely recommend you pick this one up too, depending on your party. Next we have Pride, which is opposed by Sloth and Gluttony. You also gain the Crescent Scepter focus spell. For one action, until the beginning of your next turn, if a creature attempts to attack you, it must make a will saving throw. On a successful saving throw, the target is frightened 1, and that frightened condition does apply to their attack roll. If they fail the saving throw, then they're frightened 2 instead. Another great focus spell because frightened is one of the best conditions in the game. It's a great way to keep enemies off you because if they're frightened, then that applies to everything they try to do. Offenses and defenses. And lowering their defenses for everybody is really good, as is lowering their offenses. Next we have Sloth, which is opposed by Wrath and Pride. You also gain the Reclined Abhor focus spell. For one action, you can target one unattended item of light bulk or less within 60 feet. That item teleports to your open hand. If you don't have a free hand, it falls to the ground at your feet. Heightening this spell to 3rd level allows you to target an object of 1 bulk or less. Heightening this spell to 5th level increases the range to 120 feet. And finally, heightening this spell to 7th level allows you to target an item of 2 bulk or less. This focus spell is okay. It's not great. I mean, because the item has to be unattended, you're not going to use this in combat. This is more of an out-of-combat thing. There are definitely uses for it, but I don't think you're going to use this very much. But you guys can let me know in the comments if there's something I'm not thinking of with this spell. And the last sin is Wrath, which is opposed by Envy and Sloth. You also gain the Vengeful Glare focus spell. For one action, you can target one creature you can see within 30 feet. This spell deals 1d4 damage per spell rank of cold or fire damage, your choice, with a basic fortitude save. In addition, if you've already dealt damage to the target this turn, the target also takes 1 persistent damage of that type per spell rank. Unfortunately, at the end of the day, this is just damage. I'm not a huge fan of feats and abilities that just do damage. Persistent damage can be very effective. However, this spell would be better if it gave some kind of other effect. You can use this to hit enemy weaknesses, although there aren't a huge amount of enemies that are weak to fire or cold damage. So, it's good, it's just not great. Okay, now that we've covered all the sins, we need to cover the Runelord Feats you have access to, starting with the Runelord Dedication. Right. When you refocus by indulging in your sin, you can also exchange one of your prepared spells for any spell that's in your curriculum or in your sin spells. In other words, as long as you have 10 minutes to refocus, you have a ton of versatility with the Runelord Wizard. You still can't cast spells of your opposing schools without losing everything, but this effectively means as long as you got that 10 minutes, you always have access to your sin spells and your curriculum spells. But keep in mind, the new spell must be the same rank as the one you exchanged. So you can't give up like a fear spell and then choose something like Phantasmal Calamity. That would be far too broken. And you can't go the other way either. Next we have the remastered version of the Embed Aeon Stone feat, which is effectively the exact same as it was before. You can spend 1 day embedding an Aeon Stone into your flesh. This allows it to function as if it was orbiting around your head, but makes it harder to steal it. It also makes it less likely to be noticed. You must still invest in the Aeon Stone in order for it to function as normal. You can also remove an embedded Aeon Stone within 1 day using this activity. Someone without this feat can attempt to remove the stone, but it requires a DC 30 medicine check or the creature to be dead. Next we have Aeon Resonance, which requires embedded Aeon Stone. You can now gain the resonance power of any embedded Aeon Stone as if it were placed in a Wayfinder. When you first take this feat, you can only have the resonance power of 1 Aeon Stone at a time. But at 8th level, you can take this feat again and have up to 4. Some Aeon Stones have really good resonance powers, so you may want to consider taking this feat twice. Next we have Rod of Rule. You gain the critical specialization effect for your arcane bonded weapon. In addition, anytime you critically hit a creature with your arcane bonded weapon, that creature takes a -2 penalty on its saving throws against your curriculum and sin spells until the end of your next turn. Unfortunately, you're a wizard, which means you're not going to crit all that often, but if you can pull this off, it's pretty great, actually. -2 on their saving throws? Yeah. Pretty great. Depending on your sin, of course. But like I said, unfortunately, you're not going to get much use out of this feat because you're a wizard. You're not going to crit with a weapon all that often. Next, we have the spell-shaped feat, Sin-Bladed Spell. You must be holding a weapon that is in the spear or polearm group to use this feat. If your next action is to cast a spell that is not a cantrip from your curriculum or sin spell list, the spell also deals persistent bleed damage equal to the spell's rank in addition to its other effects. This can be a very powerful feat if you use it correctly, especially with certain sins. For example, if you chose lust as your sin, then you can mess with their mind and deal them bleed damage. Or if you choose wrath, you can do even more damage on top of the damage that your wrath spells give it. Unfortunately, you probably don't want to use this feat on your curriculum spells because most of those spells you're going to be using either on your allies or on yourself. And obviously, you don't want to do bleed damage to your allies or yourself. But your sin spells, on the other hand, the ones you use on enemies, yeah, you definitely want to use this with them. Unfortunately, it does have to be a spell that only targets one creature, but this is still a fantastic option that you should definitely consider if you're playing a Runelord. We have Sin Reservoir. During your daily preparations, you can indulge in your associated sin. Doing so gives you an extra spell slot up to 2 ranks lower than your highest level spell slots. However, you can only prepare one of your curriculum spells in this slot. This means you can't put any of your sin spells or any other spell that isn't in your curriculum in the slots. But all of your curriculum spells are going to help somebody, either yourself or one of your allies. So this is a fantastic feat. I definitely recommend picking this one up if you are a Runelord. Next we have Sin Counterspell. You do need the Counterspell feat to take this feat. Instead of only being able to counter a spell with the exact same spell, you can counter a spell with any of your curriculum spells as long as the spell you're countering would violate your Sin's anathema. For example, if you're Sloth Sin, you can more easily counter spells that do elemental damage or manipulate appearances. This can be really good depending on your Sin. And if you want to play a counterspell wizard, this may be the archetype for you. And this feat will definitely help you with that. And the last feat we got in this book is Orichalcum Bond, which does require the Rod of Rule feats. When you place your personal rune on a weapon during your daily preparations, you can also choose one property rune to place on that weapon as well. This must be a rune that is your level or lower, is common, or you otherwise have access to. This rune is added to the weapon until your next daily preparations. This rune does count toward your limit of runes on the weapon. Unfortunately, there's not a whole lot of runes that are going to help you here. You're a wizard. You're not going to hit as often as, say, a marshal. And a lot of runes require critical hits to get their best effects. I mean, it can be good depending on your build, but there's not a whole lot of builds that can use this effectively. If this was armor, this would be amazing, but it's your arcane bonded weapon, so not great. And that's the new remastered Runelord Archetype. If you're a wizard fan, I would definitely consider this archetype, as a lot of these feats and spells and focus spells are really good. Some of them are a little bit, not great. But there are definitely some feats and focus spells that are worth it here. And you do get extra spells, although you are limited. But if you guys enjoyed this video, go ahead and leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more Rival Academies content, as well as other teamwork content. And you guys might want to stay tuned, because my next long form video is going to be a build using this archetype. And of course, you guys can check out my Patreon page if you want Google Sheets for all my teamwork builds, all the way up to level 20. And of course, if you guys want a build that can cast any spell in Pathfinder 2e, you can check out this video here. Thank you guys so much for watching, and remember, teamwork is vital. It helps us solve problems.